computer. All right. For those of you who are watching at home, I've opened the export audio/video dialog because that's an important component of your homework. And in order for me to do that, I had to go to File, Export Audio/Video, or I could have used Command-Shift-R to get there. I'm basically going over the various features. I've talked about this idea that you can leave the sample rate at 44,100. Talked about the idea that you can leave the bit depth at 16. I was just about to say that you could encode an MP3 as well. That's a compressed data format. It's a much smaller file size. I was also just want to mention again, even though this is on the OneNote, that it's convenient to select the region you want to export beforehand so that you don't get extra padded stuff at the end that is basically silence. A lot of people, when they first export audio, it's like a 1-minute song and then like 10 minutes of silence because they accidentally have like 10 minutes of extra stuff that isn't doing anything. So that's basically that. You have to export audio for this assignment. So once you do all that, you export. Another component of this is collecting all and saving, which I've talked about before. You basically want to make sure that all of the samples that you're referencing, the audio samples, and I guess the MIDI files as well, could potentially not get linked into the specific folder itself. It might be somewhere else on your machine. So you want to make sure that you collect it all and it's in one folder. So to ensure that, you click Collect All and Save. And yes, so if I go back to homework 1, it basically outlines all of these procedures. There is something else. I want you to embed the WAV or AIFF or MP3 directly into the submission. That allows me, that gives me a streamlined process to kind of go over your stuff instead of downloading your files. It just makes it a lot faster for me to grade and provide comments. Same with the screenshots. I prefer that you embed all the screenshots. So in case you're not familiar, this is how you do that, and label them as well. It's like an essay on OneNote. You can just be like, this is the drum pattern. And if you want, it's cool. It gives me a better context if you choose to describe what you've done, so that there's more than just a picture. You don't have to. There was some confusion on what MIDI and audio samples that I wanted you to use. Essentially, I just wanted you to work with MIDI. I didn't actually care if you downloaded MIDI from the internet or if you just made the MIDI yourself. I just want to see that you're actually getting comfortable with MIDI. Because when I taught this class last time, this concept, some of these concepts didn't stick to some people. So I just want to make sure that no one's falling behind and that everyone's using these everyone has this core competency baked in. So so one of the things you have to screenshot is a drum pattern, and technically that's a MIDI pattern. That's a MIDI data. It includes MIDI data when you're actually sequencing it and programming it in clip view. But I also want you to include another example of MIDI data, like an instrument, for instance, a melodic instrument or a chordal instrument. And an audio sample, you can use this audio sample from within Ableton, or it can be an audio sample from anywhere. It doesn't matter. And then I also want you to screenshot your favorites bar with a lot of interesting sounds, and an example of automation that you've employed. Okay, so this is all under assignment, and this will be the same format for all future assignments. So it's basically this process with different different kind of content that I'm expecting you to screenshot each time, but basically it'll be like a track with things I want you to screenshot. And then I guess also I forgot to include one important thing. Oh no, I did. It's right here. So make sure that you include your Ableton project folder as a Google Drive link. Okay, so Vuk asks, is there a way to see the length of the song in minutes, seconds, rather than measure beat, or do we have to time it manually? This is something that I forgot that existed. Actually, there's a ruler on the bottom that shows things in terms of time code. So the ruler on the top shows things in terms of bars and beats. The ruler on the bottom shows things in terms of minutes and seconds. And this is something, I just composed a audio for a film that my friend wrote, and I forgot about this feature. And after I did it, I was like, oh man, I could have saved so much time if I just remembered that there was this ruler down here. So yeah, you could look at things in terms of that view as well down here. Yes. So yeah, just make sure to include your Ableton project file folder as a Google Drive link. The other thing is, under discussions, I want you to create, basically on homework 1, I want you to basically create a subthread for your assignment. So what you can do is you can basically create a reply and be like, here's my awesome track. I'm a little nervous because I've never shared my work before. Whatever you want to say. You know, a lot of people they'll put a disclaimer out there. You don't have to put a disclaimer out there because your work is good enough the way it is. We're here to support, we're a supportive community. So just we're just here to all help each other out. You know, encourage each other, be encouraged. So put your track out there, embed the audio, and then I believe the way I've set up this discussion is that you can comment on an individual subthread without replying to the entire thread. I haven't actually done it. I was going to create a fake one with the name, hi, I'm Sally Student. This is my track, but I decided to do something else instead. So anyway, we'll kind of figure out how this works together, but that's basically the idea. The idea is when you do this, the participation grade will, one of the ways I'll gauge participation is on how you interact with each other's work. So I'm kind of aiming, I haven't set this in stone yet, but because, you know, things haven't been submitted yet, but I'll decide very soon on how much feedback I'd like you to provide. But I'm thinking maybe providing feedback on 5 of your classmates' works is a good way to do it. And I'd also encourage you to be equitable. So if you see that like one particular person is getting a bunch of comments and another person isn't, don't, you know, by all means comment on the track that has a lot of comments, but also maybe do an extra comment for that person, and then leave a comment for someone who doesn't have any feedback, just to help them. So, but yeah, I'm excited about this. It's always exciting to see what you guys come up with, and in the past, a lot of good feedback has translated to students in a positive way, where they've where collaborations have ensued and other cool things like that. So that's basically the gist of the homework. Hopefully that's a little clearer. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. Yeah, it's all here. So anyway, I guess moving on, I wanted to talk about audio sampling today to greater degree. We're going to talk about this more over time. I'm kind of give you more of a broader overview, and then we'll dive more deeply as time goes by. But there are a few things that I do want to talk about, and one of the things I want to talk about, just to kind of prep you on how to do this, is how to get audio from your system into Ableton. So for instance, one of my mentors created this website called bitwisemusic.com. And this is a really cool website because there's like a bunch of internet audio objects where you can basically generate audio from within the browser. And you could, like, for instance, this is a keyboard drum. So you can type like, hey man, what's up? Right? It's like, it's just an interesting way. It's a creative way to kind of explore music in a way that in a way that would get you ideas that you might not otherwise get. So you may very well be in a situation where you want to port these particular sounds that you've downloaded into your Ableton session. There is a workflow. It differs depending on whether you're on Windows or Macintosh. But I want to expose you to the workflow, and then basically my hope is that you'll all try this at home, install the software, and actually, you know what we'll do? This is what we'll do. See, the software requires a system restart. So what we'll do is this. We'll during break, we'll actually restart our computers, but we'll download the software now. So let's actually get to how to do this. So what you want to do is the following. If you're on Macintosh, I guess I'll explain this. Sorry that the process is very similar for both operating systems. So I'll kind of explain what to do. Keep in mind, I am on a Macintosh at the moment. I used to have Windows. I still work with Windows machines, so I can't troubleshoot with this machine, but I can help you on your machine once we get to the Windows page. But if you're on Mac, you'll want to download Soundflower. If you're on Windows, you'll want to download two things. You'll want to download ACO for All, and you'll want to download VB Cable. So right now, what I want you to do is I want you to download the relevant installer for your operating system, and just download the software right now. And then maybe in part 2, once we restart our machines, we can actually go through this step-by-step process. There's a lot of other stuff that we can talk about in the interim, so there's no rush. Is everyone having success downloading this right now? Okay. It's a little bit more involved on Windows than it is on Macintosh, but it's not so bad. It's in fact on Windows, I basically, you can see there's substantially more steps, but I basically copied the idea from a YouTube video, but just for the sake, just in case it's helpful for you, I formatted it like this for you guys to see, but you could also just watch the YouTube video. But it helped me understand it better by making this, for one. The video kind of goes by fast too. He kind of clicks things kind of quickly, so it might be helpful to look at this as well.
Professor?
Yeah.
So after installing, it said something like the package is unsigned.
Okay. Yes, so
my
absolutely.
target, I don't even see the run as administrator option on my right click.
Oh, are you on Mac? You're on Mac. This is Upo, right?
Yeah, it's Ugo.
Okay, so on Mac, if you right click, if a package is unsigned, all you have to do is right click and then click open. And then it'll actually it'll give you an option to open from that.
Okay, what does unsigned even mean?
That's a good question. I kind of know it from I know what it feels like. I don't know what it is. Like I've experienced it. It's like, I think it's like an unverified package for Macintosh. So it by default, it doesn't allow you to open it unless you right click it first.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense because it's like it's not signed off by a verified App Store developer. I think that's probably what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's right. For Windows, I think you're going to have to do something similar. You're going to have to right click and the installer though, and run as administrator. And basically these things do is they install additional audio drivers, audio devices onto your machine. And so I guess, let me just get a sense actually for, oh, you know what? Oh, there's polling. Let's see. I don't know if this will work. Never done this before. Nah, we won't do it this way. You guys know how to vote. How many of you guys have, maybe you could vote yes if you've done it already, if you've successfully done everything up to the restart. If you guys don't know how to do that, you basically click participants. Okay. And then once you click participants, you can vote. Cool. All right. I'll give you guys like a couple of minutes just to do this. In fact, is it true that when you get, Vuk, are you running Windows or Mac? Let's see. Mac. Is anyone running Windows? And who successfully finished? Is anyone
I'm running Windows.
Who said that?
Luke.
Oh, you're running Windows.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. I looked at the chat and I saw. Okay, someone else answered. Okay, great. Vuk, were you prompted to restart?
Yeah, I was.
Okay. For those who are running Macintosh, were you prompted to restart? Okay, Jack. Okay. So Macintosh people are prompted to restart. Is that true? Is Jack Wagner? Are you running Mac?
No, I'm running Windows, but I tried to download the VB cable and nothing happened.
Nothing
I
happened.
downloaded on Mac. I wasn't prompted to restart, Professor.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, okay. So when you installed, okay, when you right-click the installer for VB cable, did you run it as administrator?
So it came as a zip file, and then oh, wait, let me open it. Sorry. So it came as a zip file, and then I unzipped it, and it just says like VB cable setup. And when I clicked and ran that as an administrator, nothing popped up. It just said allow this to make changes to your computer, and then I clicked yes, and then after that nothing happened.
Does anyone have any advice on this? Because I'm not on Windows at the moment.
Did you try the 64-bit version?
No. Should I? Okay, I'll try that one.
That's a good point. Most machines nowadays are 64.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, now it works. Thank you.
Cool. Oh, cool. Jarrett already uses VB cable. Cool. The more virtual cables, the better. I guess this is an interesting thing to know how to do, especially in this virtual world we're living in. Like, network audio has never been more important than it is now when everyone's virtual. So you might be in a situation where you just want to record your friend over Zoom or something. So these kind of virtual cable things are kind of good to familiarize yourself with. That's cool. Jarrett says VB cable is super sweet, and that makes me happy to hear because I've actually never used it myself. And what are your thoughts on it, Jarrett? Let's see. All right. Okay, it looks like most people. Okay, I'll be right back. All right, guys. Some people are still working on the install because I'm actually thinking about. I'm actually just thinking about restarting right now and just like reconvening in like 5 minutes because why not? It's a 3-hour class. Why not? Who hasn't been able to get it to work so far? Okay, the Soundflower isn't working. It won't install. Perhaps, maybe you could share your screen, Catherine.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Oh, sorry, let me enable screen sharing really quick. Okay.
So looking at this.
Oh, okay,
I'll
okay, so what you want to do is you want to right click and then click open.
Yeah, I've done that, and then I'll open it. We'll go through it. That is that every time.
Oh, okay, what version of Mac are you on? Catalina? Has anyone else run into this problem and they have Catalina?
Yeah, I got this problem, but for some reason my Mac rerouted the issue. Just open settings real quick or system preferences. Okay, and then go to security and privacy. Yeah, okay, now click the lock to make changes.
Oh, cool. Okay, nice.
And then allow, at the very bottom, it says Matt Ingalls. So that's the guy who created this Soundflower thing. So just press allow.
Ah, beautiful.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And then,
Yes.
yeah, now it should work.
You came in clutch, Upo. Thank you, man.
No worries.
Let's see. Do I have to like drag this over or?
Oh no, I think you that disk is
Press-
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it should work.
Okay, thank you so much.
Fantastic. Okay, who else is still having issues with this? I think there's only a handful left. Like Andy, have you gotten this to successfully work so far?
Yeah, so after installing, it changed my audio settings to V cable automatically. And is that what's supposed to happen, or?
Okay. Oh, so you installed it and it worked. Okay. So like your playback device right now, it's the default one is the BB cable instead of.
Well, yeah, when it changed, I couldn't like hear anything, so I had to change it back to my headphones.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think. Okay. So what you want to. Okay. So here's the workflow, and just to foreshadow, you'll want to set your regular headphones as your default sound device. But when you do this process of routing audio, you're going to want to set VB cable, the cable as your default device. And that's kind of the basis. That's the basis. Like your original, the big picture is you're going to route audio instead of directly to your headphones. You're going to route it to an intermediary place like this virtual cable, whether it be Soundflower or cable. And then after that, you basically in Ableton, you set the input of your what you're listening to be the cable. So like the cable is piping into Ableton, and then you're hearing audio that way. So have you gotten ASIO for all installed as well for all those Windows folks? There's 2 things to install for Windows.
do you just run it as administrator?
I don't know if you have to do that for ASIO for all, but you do have to install it. I don't know if you have to run it as administrator. It doesn't hurt to do so.
Is the VB cable like a virtual audio interface, or is it?
You could think about it that way. Yeah, I think that's a good way because it basically it can serve as an audio input device and as an audio output device. So I would say it's like a virtual interface. It's a good way of putting it. So I guess when I was polling people, did everyone has everyone still Has everyone who's on Windows gotten ASIO for all, or are there still some people that need to get it?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to do it right now.
Cool. Because I think you might need to restart your computer for that too, but I figure you might as well do both of these things at the same time and then restart your computer instead of doing it twice. So. Okay. Can you guys do me a favor if you haven't? Well, I'll check in again in a minute, and we'll see from there. Okay, I guess I want to do a check-in. Can you put in the chat if you have not installed everything that you need to install? Okay. It seems like everyone's installed everything they need to install. Let's do this. I'm going to be here. Everyone restart your computer, or at least Windows folks, and let's say just jump on at 11:45. I'll be starting up to explain things again. In fact, I'll just start explaining to the Mac folks first while the Windows folks are restarting. Maybe that's the best way to do it. Wow, there's a lot of Windows folks in this class. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so Adil, Alejandro, Hongyu, Sean, and Paul, and Upo are all Mac folks. Okay, interesting. Okay.
No, sorry, I'm Windows.
Oh, you're Windows. Okay, for sure.
I'm Mac.
You're Mac. Okay. So,
Sorry, I just missed the last like 10 seconds. What are we doing?
Oh, I was just prompting all the Windows people to restart their computers.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I can't adjust the audio on my MacBook after making the Soundflower to be the 2-channel. Is that supposed to happen like that? Like I'm just trying to raise the zoom volume, and I just realized that it's not even doing anything.
What is your play? Can you share your screen?
Yeah. I have like 2 desktops on. Yeah, I'll just share my screen. Yeah, so okay.
Okay.
So I'm doing this, but it's having no effect on the zoom.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not. That's a little confusing to me. Maybe that is controlling how much of whatever system of sound is coming into Ableton. And Zoom, I guess it has an input and output as well. So I'm not sure. Probably the input right now for Zoom is not Soundflower. It's probably your microphone. But yeah, I guess something's happening where they're not interacting with each other. So cool. So it seems like you went through the steps, and
Yeah.
so in Ableton itself, you have Soundflower as the audio input device. Okay, awesome. So I guess.
But I had to manually change that when I restarted the computer, and it was still stuck on this one. I had to connect it.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Right. I think that's just it's probably not the default configuration. Okay, so I'm seeing something in the chat. I'm seeing, let's see, what am I seeing? By the way, the sound settings look a little bit different on Windows 10. Oh, okay. Right, I think this video is a little older. Okay, awesome. Okay, I'll put that in the OneNote right now. For Windows, it should be right-click, open sound settings, sound control panel. For Windows 10, I guess I'll share my screen, and Luke, you can tell me if this is the right place to put this. I will share my screen. Windows 10. Is this the right place to put it, Luke? For Windows 10, it should be the right click. Oh, sound settings, sound control panel.
Yeah, that's about
Awesome.
right.
Cool. All right. Another troubleshooting contribution by Vuk. All right. Awesome. Let's see. All right. So Windows people are still coming on here, I think. I guess I can just, I guess I can explain the stuff for the Macintosh people, and I'll kind of explain it again for the Windows context for the Windows people. Okay, so as I explained before, the basic idea is that your system audio, instead of going directly to your speakers, you're going to route the system audio to some virtual speakers. So on the Macintosh situation, when you choose your output device, you're going to set it to Soundflower. Now the consequence of this is if I set this to Soundflower, I'm not going to hear anything. Like if I go to YouTube or something, I'm not going to hear anything if that's all I do. Because right now it's just going to this virtual cable, and the virtual cable isn't going anywhere. You basically have you need to basically pipe that virtual cable into Ableton somehow, okay? So to demonstrate, I'll show you what I mean. And I don't know how this will work with Zoom, so this is going to be a mystery, because Zoom is adding another kind of element to this. So for instance, if I go to Soundflower, can you guys still hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, if I go to Soundflower, if I go to YouTube, and let's say I type in, okay, whoa, there's a new film about Dragon Ball Z, nice. All right, let's say yeah, Adam Neely, great YouTube channel, all right. All right, you guys can't hear anything, right? Neither can I, right? There's nothing I can hear, because right now my system audio is going to, yeah, it's just going to a virtual cable which isn't connected to anything. So ultimately what we have to do is you have to go to Ableton's preferences, the audio preferences that is, and you have to set your audio input device to be Soundflower. So when I'm going into Ableton now, I set my audio input device to be Soundflower. And now it doesn't really end there, because right now, sure, the audio is coming in. It's the input device. Soundflower is the input device, but I actually have to do some more stuff now. So actually, I have some things I wanted to mention that I think are salient to this. So in general, I'll talk about this because I think this is a general good segue to talk about this. So we've talked about recording a MIDI track, record enabling a MIDI track and all of that stuff, right? You click this button, you basically arm it, and then you could type data in, and it'll record if you press record, right? It's slightly different for Windows. It's slightly different for recording an audio track. So I'm reading the chat at the same time and getting confused. Okay. Let me take a step back really quickly. I'm looking at the chat, and sound control panel is on the right under related settings. Okay, let me just put this in the chat for those who are on Windows. Hey, Vuk, is your audio broke? Like, how broke is your audio? Can you because the thing is, I remember Andy said that what he had to do is he had to change his playback device back to his headphones because it defaults to want to go to VB cable. What you want to do is you want to set your audio output as your regular speakers as your default audio device on Windows. So
I think he's not even in the Zoom anymore. You look at the
Oh.
participants.
Oh, okay, never mind. All right. All right, so I'll get back to this conversation. You could check this out on YouTube and whatnot. How many people are here right now? Let's see. Is there a good amount? Okay, there's still a lot of people here. Good. All right. Okay, so we talked about recording audio. Sorry, I'm all over the place right now. We've talked about recording MIDI tracks, right? It's pretty straightforward, right? With audio, you have to be a little more specific in how you record. Particular, you have to choose the correct input source. There are a lot of cool things you can do depending on which input source you choose. But when on an audio track, when it says audio from, when you see external in, what this is basically saying, you're basically using your audio input device as the source of your audio. So for instance, when we go to Ableton, when I went to preferences, when you choose external in, you're basically choosing, it's basically referring to whatever device you have selected over here, okay? Got it? All right. Okay, awesome. Whew. All right, so that's what external in means. Now we're gonna talk about all kinds of creative ways to change this so that you can do other things. But for now, when we're working with Soundflower or when we're working with an audio interface with microphones, etc., we're going to want to keep this audio input source as external in, okay? I'm gonna skip the resampling thing really quickly. I'm gonna go on to choosing input channels. So in your case, your computer might come with a microphone, right? Probably does, right? If you're using your computer as an audio interface, like a laptop, for instance, you're guaranteed to have a microphone. In that case, the microphone will be the audio input device. And you might find it's strange that you'll have two inputs available to you, even though your microphone is not a stereo microphone. And you might be wondering what stereo is, right? So what I'm getting at is you select your audio input source over here, but then you have to select which channels you're recording, right? Now, in this drop-down right here, you could select something that looks like X over Y, like 1/2, which suggests that there are two input sources that are going to be recorded into this track. Those are the channels that are being monitored for recording, right? But you might also, in the drop-down menu, you might be able to access just a single value, like 1. So you can just record channel 1, okay? Now the thing is, when you see something like 1/2, that is usually referring to this idea that there's a left channel and a right channel. So for instance, a keyboard, like my keyboard down here, has a left channel and a right channel. So I can just, instead of having two separate tracks where I have a track with recording channel 1, and then I have another track recording channel 2, I can just have one track recording both channel 1 and 2. And it basically, instead of having one waveform on the recording, it'll have two waveforms on the recording. And in fact, I can show you how that looks right here. So if I go right here and I create a new track, let's break it down. So my audio input device is actually, it's a 32 channel audio interface, because I'm, trying to, I like having many microphones connected at one time, because I'm trying to like record drums or whatever. I'm trying to have like a recording studio for myself and for my friends. So I have 32 inputs. So it becomes very significant on which channel I select, right? Because I have 32, look at all these channels I have available to me. Like if I want to record my keyboard right now, I have to know which channel it's going on to. Your job's not going to be as difficult if you're just using a laptop microphone, because there's only two channels available to you, right? Just one important thing about this, in order to expose all the inputs available to you, you actually have to click Input Config, and then all of these, you have to select all the inputs that are available to you. So these are the mono inputs, and these are the stereo inputs, okay? I've done all that, and now I've got all these input possibilities for me. I could import these channels. I could import this channel, whatever, this channel. So now I'm actually need to turn on my keyboard. It's already connected to my computer. So I know off the top of my head that my keyboard is coming in to channel 27 and channel 28. Okay? So check this out. If I scroll down here, look at this. Notice how 27 and 28 are they're going crazy, right? I'm lowering the volume, and now they're like really soft, right? You probably can't hear any of this, right? Because it's not coming through yet. Or maybe you can hear it. But you can see it, right? So the idea is, if I select channel 27, I'm going to rename this keyboard left. Okay? I could do this. I could record channel 27, and then I can create a new track. I can duplicate it, Command D. I can rename this track keyboard right. Come on. Okay. A lot of clicks right there. So I could set this to be channel 28, right? I know that's the channel that I'm dealing with, right? And now you see, basically, I can record enable each of these tracks. I can hold down Command to enable multiple tracks for recording, right? I could set the monitor. Okay, I haven't talked about monitoring, but I'll set it to auto. That's the easiest thing to understand. Now you can probably hear what's coming out, right? Okay. What monitoring is it's basically allowing me to hear what my input source is. It's allowing me to hear it before I record it. This is useful because let's say you're recording a band. You want to be able to, the band doesn't want to have to wait till you start recording to hear themselves. They want to just be playing, and then the recording engineer will be like, all right, take 5, right? So this is important because it depends on your workflow, right? It depends on what you want to do. But for now, since you want to hear what I'm playing before I record anything, I'm setting monitoring to auto instead of off. I could also set it to in, but let's just stick with this for now, okay? So what's happening here is I've got a keyboard left track and a keyboard right track, and they're both record enabled, right? I can hold down Command and bam, right? I have those enabled like that. Now since these two tracks are armed for recording, their input sources are correct, their input channels are correct, now I can actually go bam. You can hear this, right? I don't know why I played that, but it's here, right? Right? It's there, right? Recorded something else, totally different, but that's what it is. Now this right here is one possible workflow, right? I have my left channel on 27, I've got my right channel on 28. I've got a mono input here as the input channel. I've got a mono input as this input channel here. But there's probably a better way to do this. And by the way, look at these waveforms. This waveform looks like one waveform, and this waveform looks like another waveform. Now, let me go and create keyboard left plus right. And now as the audio from the audio input channels that I'm going to use, what should I use? Okay, everyone say stop when I get to the right channel. Okay. All right.
Go down.
All right. All right, great. All right, awesome. 27, 28, there we go. So now if I record enable this track, so now I'm over here, I can record this track. Right? And notice how this particular track has two waveforms. It's a stereo track, so you actually see two waveforms. You see the left channel up here, and you see the right channel up here, right? So this is probably this is just a sensible way to work, I feel like. If you haven't if you have an instrument that's going to have two input sources bundled in together anyway, you might as well just use a stereo input source, right? Now, the thing is, though, most microphones are mono microphones. So you might be in a situation where your computer, for whatever reason, like for instance, I'll show you an example. I could go to my built-in input, and it says two inputs, right? I can get, like, when you open your MacBook microphone, like you'll probably have two options available to you. Why? You might wonder. It's a mono microphone source, but it's kind of silly. I think really what will happen is if you choose either one or two, it'll be the same exact input. It'll just be doubled. So really, like when you're choosing an input source from your MacBook microphone or whatnot, or your Windows laptop, you don't have to choose 1/2. Just choose one. Right? I think it's just like a thing they just like to keep it, just in case you want to have a stereo track. They allow you to have the same content on the left channel as the right channel. That's my take on it, right? So now, if I go back to 32, right? So that was the discussion on audio input channels, audio input sources. We've talked about the system audio example. There's all the stuff is on OneNote. In fact, I keep changing this because I'm trying to make it more sensible. I'm trying to, my aim in organizing this is that to minimize the number of things that are here. So as a result, I'm trying to consolidate things. So for instance, playback and export, you'll find all the setup stuff that you need to do. For instance, I think earlier I talked about the input and output configuration. I talked about how you have to select all of these inputs beforehand, right? It's all there on OneNote, so just read up on it so that in case you do have an audio interface like this, you can see all your inputs, right? But right now we're in a conversation about recording, so it's in the recording and editing tab. Okay, I've talked about the 32 input configuration option, right? So it's important to understand all this stuff before we actually talk about recording system audio, because really what's going to happen is you want to have a good idea of what's happening here, right? Instead of having my audio interface as the input device, I now want Soundflower to be the input device for the Macintosh case. So in the Macintosh case, what I'll do is I will create a new track. By the way, let me delete some of these other tracks. Okay. And I'll call this Soundflower Capture. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Preferences, and I'm going to go to Audio, and I'm going to set my input device to be Soundflower. Because remember, my system already is out, like my system audio is sending its audio, instead of going to my speaker, internal speakers or wherever, it's sending it to Soundflower first, right? Then what's happening in Ableton is that I'm gonna, for the input, remember it's gonna grab this audio. That's what an input is. It's basically like, it's taking it in, for lack of a better word. It's gonna take in that audio that Soundflower now has, and it's going to basically be able to be captured into Ableton as a result. So now what you got to do, we talked about channels and all that stuff, right? Now I talked about external in, that we can basically leave everything alone, but we do want to set monitoring to on, because remember, if monitoring's off, we're not going to hear anything that we're capturing, at least while we're playing it. Well, it's going to capture it while it's recording, but we might want to listen to it. So now if I've done everything correctly and I go back to that Adam Neely video and I arm this track, right? So that now you guys could hear that, right? That was in Ableton? Great. Okay, awesome. So that is basically the workflow. So you might be in a situation where you're on the web or you're doing something where you want to capture audio. Like YouTube isn't a great example actually, because I've exampled ways that you can just download a YouTube video, like the audio of a YouTube video. So you don't, it's like kind of it's too much work, I think, to do it this way. Not if you get good at it, or fast at it, I should say. But who knows? It might just be a workflow that you want to do this. But there are other situations, like if you're on some other website, or you're on, like, there's a Facebook video, or there's something else that it's more difficult to download it unless you know JavaScript, and you don't want to. It's just a workflow preference thing. Like, for instance, this would be impossible to source into Ableton unless we use Soundflower. So for instance, right now, let's see, I'm going to learn someone's name. This person right here is, okay. Okay, Adil. I'm looking at your name. So this is the drum beat. This is Adil's drum beat. Hi, Adil. Okay. So now in Ableton, here we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to record. It's already record enabled. Now I can. Oh yeah, by the way, here's something to keep in mind. Sorry, Adil. You'll be back there in no time. You want to set the audio source to be a stereo audio source, because actually a lot of these drum machines and a lot of the things online, like YouTube. Oh, you can't hear it. Is that happening for anyone else? What could?
It's like very faint.
Oh, it was very faint.
Yeah, like barely.
It's very faint right now?
Yep, yep.
Is it worse
Is it
now?
working for most people? It might be just me. Oh, I think Jack said it's the same.
No, it's the same for me. It's like very faint.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's you can't hear anything, or Jarrett, or you can't. It's just faint. This might be like a Zoom thing. Like I don't know if this is a Zoom thing, but what if? Okay, I'm just gonna record it and see if it actually, if you can hear it after that. Can you hear it now?
No.
Nope.
Oh, I know why. I know why. Okay, my bad. I didn't set my Zoom audio. I didn't set my output to be the Zoom audio device. Okay, there we go.
Oh, okay, cool.
All right, so now you can hear it.
Yeah, we can hear it now.
I'm amazed you were able to hear anything at all. Like, because like my headphones are on, so like I don't know how you were able to hear anything.
That's why, I'm pretty sure that's why it was faint. We were hearing the audio through your headphones.
Okay, gotcha. Man, that is tricky. Okay, so none of that stuff I was doing earlier, maybe like the keyboard and all that stuff, you can hear very well. Or was I recording correctly at that point? Maybe you can hear any of that, but it's all good. Okay, so anyway, now you can hear this drum beat, right? All right, so great. Let's Hong Yu. Ooh, it's a good beat, Hong Yu. Okay. So if I want to sample this in Ableton, now that I've set, I do want to say one thing. You want to make sure that you're actually sourcing in stereo. So 1 and 2 for Soundflower, because a YouTube video actually, I believe, broadcasts in stereo. Like it's got some content, it's a stereo output. So when you're sourcing from Soundflower, you want to source in stereo. Like you want to source a pair of left and right channels. 1 is the left channel, 2 is the right channel, okay? So now if I get back to this and I say, hi Hong Yu. Oh, it's muted. I can just record it. There we go, right? We've got something right here. Okay, great. The other thing I want to say.
I have a question.
Sure.
As well. Oh, sorry.
Could you set your sound card as the input device directly instead of Sunflower or some third-party software?
I don't know how to. I don't know if you can do that, because unless you, I don't think you can on Mac. On Windows, you might be able to. On Windows, you might be able to do that, but it's a little. It's different for Windows than it is for Mac.
Okay.
But I guess this might be a good time to just kind of go over the Windows workflow really quickly, for those of you who are curious. So for Windows, it's a little more complicated, at least the way I found. But this seemed to be it seemed a little complicated, but it was such a well-revered video in terms of like the feedback that I feel like maybe this is the simplest way to do it. So you've downloaded ASIO for All, and what ASIO for All is it's basically it gives you more flexibility in routing for a Windows audio. Jarrett, when you got VB Cable to work, did you have to use ASIO for All?
No, I used it. I almost feel like maybe my computer already had an ASIO for All driver installed.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but I didn't use it in like ASIO for All. I just used it to pipe through like a VST host. So I was just running, I have a condenser mic, and I was running a cable through a VST that would cut off some background noise and then out to my system.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's for like for podcasting or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
oh, that's cool. Okay, so I mean, I think that's somewhat similar to what we're going to do. Maybe ASIO for All is redundant, but we'll do it anyway. So similar to the Soundflower principle, what you're going to do is your system's going to output to VB cable, which is a virtual audio cable. And there are some additional tips that were put in the chat about how to do this. Okay, let me add some of Vuk's advice here. Some of you guys might have already done this. Hopefully you've been doing this. Okay, also, so essentially you're going to want to access your playback preferences on Windows so that you can actually change your audio output device to be this cable thing. Okay, that's important because remember we're gonna pipe the audio to this virtual cable. That's the first step. Okay, so for Windows, oh whoops, you get to the screen and you basically set VB cable or cable, whatever it's called, to be the default device as the output, as the playback device, the default playback device. And if you do this correctly, at least on this version of Windows, the option to make it default will disappear. Okay. The next step is when you're on Windows, is ASIO for All is a cable management solution, as I mentioned, and so you're going to want to change your audio device to be ASIO for All. Okay. So that you can have a little more flexibility in what is the input device and what is the output device. Because I think the idea is that Windows struggles to do, it depends. So you might find a quicker workflow for certain versions of Windows, but this advice is guaranteed to work as far as I've learned. So what ASIO for All will do, which incidentally I used to use ASIO for All all the time, I found it to be a little faster than, I found that I could get lower latency with ASIO for All. So I really liked it. So you set ASIO for All as the audio device. You set the driver type to be ASIO. And then after that, you have to expose some of these controls. So you have to click the wrench icon to expose these controls. And you have to click
Professor?
the plus. Oh, yes.
Sorry, in chat, Vuk pointed out that you actually have to click hardware setup instead of input config on the Ableton settings on that picture.
You have to click hardware setup instead of input config. Okay,
That's
cool.
what Vuk said.
Oh, great. Oh, I see. Oh, thank you for pointing that out. That's absolutely correct. The problem with OneNote is that these things get moved. Either I put this in the wrong spot, but OneNote does this stupid thing. It's not doing it right now. It does this, and everything gets offset. Okay, so that's great. It's very likely I put it in wrong to begin with, but I'm glad you pointed that out. So you have to click. I absolutely put it in wrong because I typed input config. So I'm glad this has been rectified. Click hardware setup to open ASIO for All's configuration settings. And then what you do is you have to click the wrench icon to expose all the controls. And you have to, again, you again have to expose even more configuration options by clicking the plus button. And then what you do essentially is you set your, what this up here is referring to is your system audio interface, like the audio interface the hardware audio interface that comes with your system, with like the input and output. And then what's down here is this virtual interface that you just installed. And essentially what you want to do is you want to make the configuration look like this, where the input is the cable serving as the input, and your hardware interface is serving as the output. That's basically what's going on. Because remember, the cable is piping in, it's the input into Ableton via this ASIO for All thing, and then you set your audio interface as the output. Now, I know this is confusing. I'm not going to lie. Like this hurts my brain just thinking about it. So if this hurts your brain, welcome to the club. I'm used to thinking about things like this because audio routing, as you get deeper, it gets more complicated. But if it gives you any solace, you just have to do this once, I believe, and it should retain these settings for future use. And just kind of, even if you just memorize how to do this, the objective is just to be able to sample audio into your machine. So
I had a quick question.
Sure.
So when I tried to do this setup, I wasn't able to hear the Zoom call at all. What should we be like? Are there any or has anybody been able to figure out any Zoom settings to help us avoid that? Because I can see that I'm able to set Zoom's output to be like the VB cable. I don't know if that should be what I'm doing, or
you know what? You're absolutely right. I realized that, and now that I'm thinking about it, because ASIO for All will hog your audio driver. So I think when you're using ASIO for All, I think that the only software that can use ASIO for All is Ableton, because it's basically using that driver. So I think Zoom will act finicky, and I think that's a limitation of this particular workflow. So the case might be that you have to just do this after class. Like this is just a tool for how to do it, but when you actually do this, you're not going to be on a Zoom call anyway, likely. So that is a limitation, I guess, of this particular workflow. Darn. Did anyone? But I heard an is there hope?
Oh, well, I had a question. I wasn't sure if my mic was working or anything like that.
Okay.
When I'm trying to set my ACO driver type, it says like audio device, and then I click on ACO for All V2, and it just gives me a prompt that says live does not support 8,000 as a sample rate for the device ACO for All V2.
I had the same.
Oh, live does not. Okay, so I think what you got to do for that is I think you got to. It doesn't support 8,000 as a sample rate.
Yeah, and it doesn't give me the option to channel configuration or hardware setup or anything like that. It just like stops me at that prompt, and I just have to click OK. And then
okay, I think what you have to do is I think you actually have to go to ASIO for All. Like you see right here in the OneNote where it says buffer size, ASIO buffer size. I think you have to open ASIO for All separately. Like just it's on your machine, and then change that, because it might. Does it say 8,000 over there? And
I need to check it. All right, I don't know how to open it without. Hold on. Sorry.
No worries. I believe when I had it, I think it was hidden inside the bottom right hand side of Windows, like where the clock is and all that stuff. But it's been a while. My hunch is that you have to set the value there before you can actually.
All right, so I got to the thing. So it says buffer size is 512 samples.
Okay.
But also like I have like a lot of devices here, and I might not be on the right one or something like that. Like, do I have to click a certain device?
Audio device. What are the other devices that you have available to you?
So I have my headphones, and then I have my regular computer audio, then I have my Y622 stereo. I don't know what that is.
Why don't you share your screen? We can
Yeah.
see if Okay, so can you click the wrench icon just to expose the extra controls?
This one?
Yeah. And then I guess okay, so when you're in Ableton,
Yeah, so it gives me like this thing.
Live does not support 8,000. I'm just gonna Google this really quickly.
Are there any devices under there in your device list that are 8,000?
I'm not sure.
I think I found a solution on Reddit.
Nice.
I think it has to do with Bluetooth. Like I think certain, are you using a Bluetooth device right now?
Kind of, yeah, I am. It's it's connected, but I'm not really using it.
I think if you disconnect it, there's a big thread on Reddit where someone solved it. Basically, they were suggesting. I'll put it in the chat right here.
Mm.
And someone found it. It's like the third comment down or something.
Let's turn Bluetooth off. Okay. Yeah. So should I just like restart Ableton then?
I guess, yeah. You could try that. But
someone else on the Reddit also said, turn off any devices with 8,000 as a sample rate in the device list.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess that would help, but I guess if you did turn off Bluetooth in general, the computer wouldn't have a way of knowing that it existed. But yeah, you might want to just. It's funny that it's still existing on the ACO for all menu. So maybe. Okay, let's see. We'll see if this solves it. If not, we might have to do some other stuff. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right.
But now I can't hear anything on Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. So unfortunately, I guess I can just walk you through the setup, and I guess maybe I'll make it a homework assignment to see if you can kind of get audio from somewhere else into your computer. Obviously, it's a little different on Windows than it is on Mac. There might be a simpler way to do this, but I think this is the most generalizable way. I think certain Windows machines have like an additional driver to do this, but anyway, if you follow the remaining steps, it should work the same way that I showed you that it worked for Macintosh. So that is, once you get everything configured, what you're going to have to do is make sure that your ACO for all looks like the way it looks like on the OneNote. And then you basically have to monitor a track, and then you select channels 1 and 2, and then when you play audio from your machine, it'll pipe into Ableton, essentially. And then when you're done, what you have to do is you have to go down and you have to set your driver the way. I would advise you to set your driver back to the way it was, and I would advise you to change your speakers back to being the default device. So, I'm not sharing my screen right now. right, so that is a little bit of network audio. I think that's worth talking about because we're in a digital age, and it's a fun thing to do because we're going to talk about sampling, and it's also a useful conversation, I guess, to talk about in terms of audio routing in general, because it's something that is neglected to talk about, but it's especially salient, I think, in these current times. So we've talked about sampling from external sources. But what we could do, actually, which is kind of another interesting thing we can do, is we could sample from Ableton directly. Now, what does that mean? Okay, so let's say I have drums right here. I'm going to create a new drum pattern. I know what these drums sound like. I'm going to do my standard 4 on the floor kick. In fact, I can actually play these drums in. Let's see. Mute this. Okay, let's see. This is a strange drum. Let me find another drum pad. Let's see. I'm going to go to drums. I'm going to go to, maybe I'll go to 808, classic hip hop drums. Okay. Okay, so I'll put these on right here. Right. I'll just record some drums in, and I'll show you something that's kind of interesting. Oh, wow. Okay, well, other stuff started playing after that. I don't know if you can still hear this, right? Can you hear what I was just doing? Okay, cool. So the drums came in. It seems like my latency is a little lower today for whatever reason. I'm not complaining about that. Okay, I'm going to quantize these. I found the grid setting that I think works best. Remember, Command 1 and 2 are your best friends in this endeavor. So that looks about right. It looks like, I probably meant to put this here, probably maybe meant to put this here, maybe I meant to put this here, etc., right? Quantize. No, actually, that's wrong. Okay, let's try this one. Okay, cool. Now I've got all kinds of other stuff that I just recorded live. Let me collapse these. Incidentally, a way to collapse tracks is by holding down Option and then scrolling up and down. So to vertically collapse tracks. So I've got this drum pattern. Maybe I'll just I'll just move this over here because I don't know how this will fit into what I'm about to make. But okay. Now I made this drum pattern actually in session view. Sorry, probably shouldn't have done that, but I made it. Okay, I could have done the same thing in arrangement view. It doesn't really matter. If this does happen to you, I do want you to be aware of this particular button. This button will basically allow you to make sure that you switch back to arrangement, because right now this particular track is still playing in session view, but it needs to be playing on arrangement view. So, all right, we'll talk more about session view later. But for now, just pretend I made this in arrangement view. I've got a drum clip right here, right? Right? Everyone knows how to make something sort of like that, right? Now, you might be in a situation where you want to actually, want to have this as an audio file instead of as a MIDI file, okay? There's a couple ways that you can do that. Why would you ever want to do that, first of all? Like, look at all this flexible data right here that I can just use. I can move these things around. Everything's really beautiful the way it is, right? But there are some nice things that you can do once you convert this to audio. For instance, there's a quick way to convert this to audio, which is called freezing and flattening, okay? So if I right-click this track, right here, this little clip, I should say, I can click Freeze Track. And what that will do is it'll basically, it'll conserve a lot of processing power on your machine. And it'll make it such that if you have an expensive device, like an expensive VST, it basically frees up the processing so it's not using that device anymore. It's just basically, it's basically rendered it immobile so that it's like it has the speed of an audio file. So it's much easier for the computer to look it up, and it's not taking up as much processing power. Okay, so that's like a simple thing that you can do to improve performance if your computer's choking, right? But if you right-click it one more time and you click flatten, you can actually convert that drum that you just made into an audio file. And now, what we've just made, which used to look like this, now looks like this. Right? This is the audio file representation of what this is. Like this as an audio file, like with the particular device that we've chosen, looks like this. Right? So why would you want to do that? Well, there's all kinds of cool things you can do when you have something as an audio file. For one, glitchy effects. So let's say I want to do something like this. I can duplicate this. Right? That's fun. I love it, right? You can do all kinds of interesting stuff by glitching stuff. Let's say I want to stretch this out. Okay, that didn't work quite the way I wanted it to. Let's say I want to do a larger section. Just Command R. Let's say I want to do this. Let's say these glitches are too closely spaced together. I can go back to clip view, and now I can reverse this one. Or I can do this. Let's say, like, it's not really perceptible to reverse that, so I can, let's say I select this. Command E is their friend. Command E basically allows you to chop up a region. Like, so for right now, this is a MIDI clip, right? Command E and Command J are like two peas in a pod, okay? Command E, when you select a region, you can cut it. Now look, there's two separate clips. There's a clip here, and there's a clip here. This is one of my like most used shortcuts. Like I use it all the time because I want to take a smaller section of an audio waveform from a bigger section. So I take this little section right here. Let's say I want to reverse this section. Go to the clip view, click reverse. Right? It's like a reversed kind of sound, right? Duplicate that just for more effect. Right? I haven't put a lot of thought into these decisions, but you can kind of see the possibility for creative application, right? Like there's a lot of fun stuff you can do by chopping things up and doing things this way. So, you know, just converting your drums that you've made into an audio file, you can do all kinds of all these interesting audio manipulations, these sampling sort of things. So this is a way that clip view, in fact, let me, clip view and for an audio file is very different from clip view from a MIDI file. So I actually, let me move my thing out of the way. I actually disambiguated these. So if you go to recording and editing, you'll see all the relevant, this is an ongoing list, but you'll see a lot of the relevant controls for a MIDI clip. We've talked about that already, right? We haven't talked about grooves. I haven't explained velocities yet. That's useful. But for an audio clip, there's all kinds of interesting things that you can do that you can't do, with a MIDI clip. So one of the things that we can do is you can transpose a particular clip to make it sound lower or higher in pitch, which is kind of cool. So the idea is, let's say actually, let me just start all over again. I'm going to undo. I love doing little glitchy things like this in my music. So let's say like I want the first bit of the clip to be a lower pitch. So let's say I want from beat 1 to beat 3 to be a lower pitch. What shortcut should I use? What shortcut should I use if I am trying to, if I'm trying to cut a particular thing? I'm gonna hover over the key. Okay, what is the shortcut to cut a clip at a particular point? I hold down Command or Control And what letter? Tell me to stop when I get there.
Stop.
Okay, great. Command E, right? Command E is the shortcut for chopping something up. So for instance, from beat 1 to beat 3, 1.1 to 1.3, I'm going to press Command E, and now look, there's two different clips. Just like that. It's magic. Okay? Impress your friends at a party, right? It's a very fun thing to do. Now you have this separate clip right here. Now I can reverse this clip. Right? Or I can even detune this clip. So, or transpose this clip. So let's say I want this clip to be 7 semitones lower, right? That's a perfect fifth, I believe, right? These are half steps. If you recall, on our picture of the piano, under composition and theory, where did I put it? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I've lost myself. Well, anyway, a half step essentially is the smallest distance on a keyboard. Just, I don't want to leave anyone behind. So on a piano, a semitone basically is the smallest distance that you can make on a piano. So for instance, if you just go along here and step from one to the other, from one to the next note, that's basically a half step. That's a semitone. So when you're transposing it, you're basically transposing it from like this note to this note, and this note to this note, etc. Right? So for instance, if I'm going back to this particular menu and I see transpose and it says 0 ST, that's standing for semitones. So if I go down one semitone, we're basically lowering one pitch on the piano. Okay? So what that sounds like is this. Right? That's 7 semitones. That sounds considerably lower. Let's go all the way. Let's go to 48. Right? That's cool, right? And that's more dramatic, right? That's actually taking it down 4 octaves. For those of you who are familiar with that term, it's a lot. Now, you can mess around with this. You can use this tool for a lot of reasons. Let's say, like, actually, you could use this tool if you're singing. Let's say you've recorded yourself singing into Ableton and you just feel that you haven't hit the correct note. Well, you could chop your audio up so that you're like, okay, I'm going to transpose myself singing so that it sounds better at this particular point by transposing it up 1 semitone. Or so what this detune parameter will do is it basically allows you to transpose in increments of, it's fine tuning, right? It's fine tuning. It's finer adjustments, so you can actually adjust the value in this number box so that it goes in 1/100ths of a particular piano's note distance on a keyboard. So it's a very, very fine adjustment. So this is basically going in 1/100th. What CT stands for is cents. So there's 100 cents in a semitone, if that makes sense. Okay. So that
pun
is
intended.
Yeah, pun and fun intended, right? So that is that's something to keep in mind. So if I set this to 50 cents, this is exactly this is half of a semitone. So there's like so right now I'm exactly 1/2 step off from a piano. In between, exactly in between 2 notes of a piano. And this is interesting, right? It's not, you're not going to hear this for a drum sound, but if I brought in a particular, like an instrumental sound, for instance, you would, and you compared it to another sound that was perfectly in tune, you would find that the piano sound was extremely out of tune to your ears. You'll say, man, this sounds really out of tune. Well, it is out of tune, and you made it that way, so don't complain. But you can do a lot of cool things, like detuning something can make something sound lo-fi. And again, this is not something applicable for drums per se, but it's something to keep in mind when you're actually working with stuff. Okay, I've talked about reversing, right? I don't know what this is. I'll have to look at what this is. This looks promising. you can actually adjust the clip gain of a particular clip by adjusting this particular volume right here. And you can see how it actually reflects in the waveform. This is something I use all the time because I find that the way I work, actually, I work in a very Frankenstein manner. See, I like playing different instruments that I'm not that proficient at, but I like Frankensteining my way into creating a piece of music so that I can like make it work. But the result of me like doing take after take after take, like, oh, I'm gonna do like 4 bars of drums, and then I'll like Frankenstein it with 4 other bars of drums, and then I'll Frankenstein it with 4 other. The problem is like you'll find that sometimes the level of what, like I recorded this take much louder than this take. And so actually it's kind of beneficial for me to go in and be like, I'll kind of match the level of all these different takes so that it sounds seamless. Because if I don't do that, listen to how disorienting this sounds. It's like if that was on a track that you made, it would sound unequal in terms of level. So clip gain is something I use all the time. Now, here's a really significant difference between MIDI clips and audio clips. And that has to do with warping. This is a huge, huge thing that we're going to talk about. But first, before I talk about it, let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about warping. So
I have a question.
Sure.
So I sent my code to the mysterious email.
Oh, okay.
I'm just basically waiting to get the file back.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. That person who has that mysterious email doesn't always check that email. So
Okay,
thank you for letting me know. I will tell that person to check their mysterious email address.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll just slap them on the wrist. I'll be like, how dare you for doing this in the first place? So absolutely, I've heard that there's been success for getting that set up. And it's never too late, by the way. You can have 2 versions simultaneously, according to this mysterious person. So
Got it, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, guys, let's take 10, and we'll get right on to sampling. See you at 12:50. All right. Well, another minute. Alexa, what's my notification?
One new notification from Amazon Shopping. Video capture has arrived. Elgato Key Light will arrive today.
Nice. All right, everyone. Okay, let's get back to it. Before I guess we could talk about work. There are some other things I want to mention. I don't want to forget to tell you about, but we could talk about that later. So, let me just see. Let me ask people to start their videos again, just in case just to see. It really helps. Let's see. All right. Okay. 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 All right. So keep in mind when we're working with these audio samples, we're actually in we have something in clip view, but we actually don't have anything in device view, which is interesting, right? Because we don't need a device because it's just an audio waveform. Like there's nothing that needs to make the sound because the sound is actually represented. It's already made already. It's represented by all of these little points. And we were talking earlier about how your computer will sample an audio file 44,100 times a second. Well, if you zoom in enough, you'll actually see every single point, and you'll see some of these points a little higher and some of these points a little lower, right? Now, the resolution of points, like how many points you can actually squeeze in, like that is really meaning can you bring this point down here or up here? How many different degrees of points can you create? That's bit depth. That pertains to bit depth. The actual number of points themselves, that is the sample rate, right? So my claim is it's kind of hard to believe that there are actually at least 44,100 of these points every single second. And as I scroll, see how the line goes up, the curve goes up. Look at that. Isn't that crazy? It's beautiful. It's physics. All right. So, and actually that is basically imitating a waveform by just sampling it at certain points. So we're talking about sampling, but really one thing you could consider sampling, what the scientific definition of sampling is at the individual point level. Like hip hop producers will talk about sampling, like, hey, I sampled this thing. You really took like hundreds of thousands of samples of that thing, right? You didn't just sample it, you didn't just take one sample. It's like actually 100,000. It's probably 1 million samples in that particular sample, right? So these are all the individual samples. It's just little points of data, right? So that's why we don't need a device, right? Because what's happening here is these points actually correspond. When you actually, let me see if I can zoom out now. Can't zoom out now. There, yeah, there we go. This actually is readable by your speaker, or it gets converted to a continuous waveform. Eventually, how there's just individual points. Eventually, you kind of round it off. Like you round this point, you create a line through all these points, and then basically what happens after that is it gets sent through your speakers, and then those sets of vibrations actually vibrate at the same rate as, they actually vibrate our tympanic membrane, and that gets interpreted by our brain, and that's basically the science of sound in a nutshell. But so that's, long story short, this is why we don't need a device to create the sound, because the sound is already created. It's created like literally piece by piece by piece, sample by sample by sample. Now, a consequence of this is that there are lots of consequences to this. Like, it's not necessarily obvious how you would speed up the sample or slow down the sample. So for instance, this is a little drum beat that we made earlier. Let's just do this all again, right? I'll just create a new drum beat. So we can just get a fresh sample, or actually I'll just take a sample that I found online. I think I found a sample over here. I'll just find it again. So drum loop. So this time, instead of making the drum, I will look for an audio sample of a drum loop. Right, I'll drag it on here. Now notice when I drag it on here, warp is on. What if I turn that off? We'll find out. Now check this out. Check out the metronome right now. And while I play this, incidentally, you can't probably hear the metronome too loudly, can you? If you want to adjust the volume of the metronome, you have to adjust the cue volume. Basically, in arrangement view, it's the volume right next to the main volume. This is the cue volume, or the preview volume. It's a little louder now, right? This also, you want to be careful when you set this volume, because actually it makes all of the sounds in your browser become louder too. So for instance, if I set this really loud, I won't hurt your ears, but I'll lower this, because now, if I set this louder, this will get louder too. If I set this really soft, right? So that's something useful to know, because I remember there was a time in my life where I'd set levels, I'd be like listening to samples, and they would be so loud, and be like, why are these so loud compared to my track? Well, it's because of this cue volume right here. And it's kind of unfortunate that it's the same exact knob as the metronome, because you kind of want the metronome to be loud. So it is what it is. You could always create a separate audio click track, but it's all good. Now, essentially, the rationale behind doing this is the following. I'm basically trying to show you that this drum pattern is actually in sync with the metronome. Now, if I turn off warp, what you're going to find is that the drum loop is actually not in sync with the metronome anymore. Right? So consequence, this is one of the coolest things about Ableton, and actually all the other softwares copied it. So I guess this is one of the coolest things about digital audio in the 21st century, is this ability to warp audio. What it basically does is it warps it. It detects the BPM of the particular segment, and then it finds out the BPM, like how many beats per minute the segment has, and then it'll stretch or squish the speed of the sample according to the tempo, so that it matches the tempo of your actual arrangement, which is pretty cool. Ooh, sorry, my cats are fighting. All right. So this is really cool that you can do this, because you can speed this up, for instance. It still lines up with the metronome. Whereas if I turned off warp, actually what's going to happen is that the sample won't change speed at all. Because what's happening is it's still going to read. So this is the interesting thing, okay? This particular sample, it says right here 44.1 kilohertz. What that means is it's reading in, it's playing out 44,100 samples a second. Like, remember we talked about these points? There really are 44,100 samples per second. If you turn off warp, it's going to say, I don't care. I don't care if you change the tempo. I'm still going to play 44,100 of these samples a second. That's why if I change the tempo, it still sounds exactly the same. It's just spreading out the samples. It's just spreading out how they look on Ableton. But reality, it's like I change the tempo. It's like, okay, it doesn't matter. I'll still play those 44,100 samples. It'll just reflect properly on this timeline so that I'm actually playing the 100th sample here instead of playing the 100th sample here, for instance, right? So long story short, if you don't turn on warp, it'll play, the audio file will play at the same speed no matter what. It'll play at the sample rate, which is 44,100 samples per second, right? If you turn on warp, it'll actually play, what it'll do is it won't play, actually won't play 44,100 samples per second necessarily. At least it won't play the 44,100 samples in order. It'll play certain samples earlier than other samples. I guess I'll demonstrate, maybe, I'm hoping that's a true statement, but I'll demonstrate the practicality of turning on warp and the different modes. One thing is, when you're on warp mode, it'll try to figure out the segment BPM. Now, the problem is, if you change the tempo of the track, it'll kind of mess up the segment BPM. And I remember the segment BPM being 80 beats per minute. Now it's changed it to 180, so this will sound terrible. It's not synced up at all, right? What you want to do to get it back to recognizing the segment BPM, basically discovering the tempo of the clip itself, is right-clicking right here, and then at the very beginning, basically you set it at the very beginning and you click warp from here. And sometimes it'll actually find the segment BPM by a factor of 2. So you can divide it by 2, and what do we get? We get back to 80, right? So that was kind of cool. Why did that happen? Why is it kind of glitching out when I change the tempo? That is an interesting thing. That is a super, super interesting thing. Right now we're in beats mode, which means that it means the following. Before I tell you what that is, I want to explain to you what these little things are. These things right here are called transients. And what Ableton has discovered for us are basically where the loudest parts of the sample are, right? So it's discovered there's a really loud part here, 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 right? And it's matched that up and it's figured it out, right? Now, those are called warp markers. Why is this significant? Because this is really like, if you think about a drum kit, you really are concerned about where the loudest, basically when you hit the drum, those are loud points in the waveform. So this is useful in showing you where the drum hits actually are. It's saying there's a drum hit here, a drum hit here, there's a little drum hit here, a little drum hit here. So one thing you could do is you could turn some of these warp markers into, you can turn some of these transients into warp markers. For one, you could actually, these transients are where Ableton thinks the transients are. But you could actually say, I think there's actually a transient somewhere else. I want to move this waveform a little bit around. You can actually move the waveform. So check this out. So the way you have to do it is you have to create 3 warp markers. You double click over here, and then you can kind of drag the wave around. So for instance, if I do this, right, it'll play this part really, right, it's going to play this part, it's going to time stretch this first part out, because it's like, originally this part was supposed to last only this long, but you're making it last twice as long, which is making it seem like it's really, really slow, right? Right? So that's an interesting aspect of warp markers. So essentially, just to recap, this is useful because if you want to move around where a drum lines up on the grid, you can do that. Or if you want to turn off the grid, you can do that too, and you can just move it anywhere you want, right? But you can also snap it to the grid. Oftentimes I leave the grid on because sometimes my playing is imprecise. Like I'm recording audio, this is like a way to quantize, isn't it? Like you can actually quantize audio by doing this. Because like, let's say like the drummer was a little late right here. I'm just going to pretend the drummer was a little late right here. That actually kind of sounded cool. It's got a drunk groove to it, right? But let's say you didn't want it to have that groove. You wanted it to be on time. And you're like, man, I wanted this whatever you played, a kick drum here, a snare drum. You wanted the snare to be right on time. Well, you can just create a warp marker and drag it, right? So that's a useful thing to be able to do. You can deselect or remove warp markers by double clicking. And but I want to caution you that you have to create 3 warp markers. You have to create 2. You have to create a warp marker at the point you want to warp at, but you have to create 2 warp markers around it, or else if you don't, notice how everything you see what happens. Like everything is getting stretched. You might not want everything to get further in time. You might only want this to get behind or further in time, right? So that's why you have to kind of anchor it by having 2 warp markers around it, if that makes sense. I'll put this on the homework. I think this is a good thing to warp speed ahead. Okay, that's fun. Okay, so this is all good and dandy, right? Now, what you could do also is engage. You could play around with these different modes. Now, what Beats does is it privileges beats or specific attack points as the most important parts of the sample, and it'll make sure that those spots are on time, essentially, because when you're changing the tempo of this track, you're really when you're changing the tempo of this track, you're really messing around with the timings of everything, whether or not you realize it or not. You might think that all the relative timings will coincide where you expect them to be. You might think that would be the case. Like, for example, let's say like if I slowed this down to 20 beats per minute, you might think that beat 2 will still land on beat 2 because it looks like it does over here, right? And beat 3 will still land on beat 3. But because like the drummer might be a little like imprecise, you know, like actually he was a little late, right? You're going to notice that those kind of differences at really, really slow tempos. So what Beats mode allows you to do is it allows you to basically make sure that the transients, the actual attacks of the drums, happen on the beat. And the other stuff kind of gets repeated or looped or whatever, but it just ensures that the actual hit of the drum happens right on time so that you get a really clean, nice attack. So I'll just play it to show you. You see how it's doing this weird looping behavior, right? But it's doing the looping behavior because it's like it's making sure that the sample is. What it's basically making happen is that I guess this is what's happening. It's making it sound like the transients are really longer than they actually are at that tempo. So it's making it seem like you can actually hear the snare, you can actually hear the crack of the snare drum right here. If you didn't have it in Beats mode, it would sound really crazy. So actually, what it's actually doing, if I have to choose my words correctly here, is it's actually speeding up right here, and then it's got a lot of extra time because like it's sped up, so it has to fill up the time with extra stuff, essentially. It's basically making sure that the transients sound like the way they normally would on a drum kit. Like the actual hits themselves sound correct, and everything around it is less important, right? Because you can still tell that this is a drum kit, right? Whereas if I change this to Complex Pro, it might not be so obvious that's a drum kit. So I guess without getting too into the specifics, Beats is a good mode to be in if you're working with percussive sort of samples. And it really ensures that the actual transients that you're using occur on time and that you can actually hear them. If you're in Complex Pro, the transients, I guess you could say they do occur on time, but you can't hear them because everything is slowed down. Beats is making it so that actually the transients are playing at the right are playing at the right speed, the original speed, I should say, that they were programmed to be, and everything else around it is being stretched or squashed or repeated in favor of having the transients being recorded or being played back at the original speed. Okay, that's the truth of the matter. Does anyone have any questions on that? It's confusing, isn't it? Okay, so I guess I'll ask you this. In Complex Pro, are the transients playing at the original speed? No, they're not. They're not at every single tempo except the original tempo. The transients are either being played slower or faster depending on the tempo. Whereas in Beats mode, the transients are playing at the original speed. Like if you listen to the original sample unwarped, it would sound like this particular part of the hit you see how you could still hear it? You could hear that snare right there at the very beginning of it. It sounds like a snare. It doesn't sound like this. It sounds like a snare. So it's like for that particular moment in time, it's being brought back to the original speed, and everything else is afterwards. Because you're changing the tempo of everything, you got to fill up the space with stuff. So that's why you're hearing all these iterations of stuff repeating, because the computer's like, well, I got to fill up the space. What am I supposed to do? Well, you can do multiple things. You could fill up the space by repeating stuff over and over again, or you see what's happening here? It's sort of a gated effect. All the transients are playing at the original speed, but all the stuff around the transients are sort of being gated. Like it's just like it's got extra time to fill up the space, right? There's extra time available to you. But it's like, we're just like, who cares? We don't need that, right? You could repeat, there's many ways you could fill up the space. You could say, I'm not gonna fill up the space at all, or I could fill up the space by looping it from the beginning again and again. Or I can loop up the space by going forwards and backwards, forwards and backwards, forwards and backwards. Doesn't that sound neat? Like, I just think that just sounds cool. So here's the thing though, you don't actually have to go down to 20 beats per minute on your transport to get this effect. Let's say you want to get this effect. You like this really glitchy kind of sounding drum thing, right? Let's go back to a reasonable tempo. Let's go to 100, okay? Now the segment BPM is, let's go back to 70, right? The segment BPM is 70. Sorry, it's 80. Let's divide the segment BPM by 2. Let's divide it by 2 again. Let's multiply it by 2 again. So this allows you to get these really right? You can get all kinds of interesting stuff that way. So like, you know, it gives it a little more character, because sometimes you don't want things to be perfect. You want things to be a little bit distorted and a little bit frayed around the edges. It gives it a little more character. And that's something I'm coming to terms with too. Because sometimes I get so obsessed with quantization and things just sound artificial. Whereas if you give it a little bit of this, all of a sudden now it sounds cool, right? So that's the idea behind the beats quantization mode, right? You don't have to use beats, but for drums, beats make sense because you want the original drum hits to sound realistic, right? When you go to Complex Pro, this is good for singing. I find it to be good for singing. Like Complex and Complex Pro, I find useful because I can actually, if I'm changing the speed of something, or if I'm changing the pitch of something, for instance, of a vocal sample, and I want it to line up in real time, I don't want it to sound glitchy. I don't want it to be like I want it to just be like I want it to be continuous. Even if it sounds a little slightly off, perhaps I want it to sound continuous. So that's when I'd use Pro and Complex Pro. Repitch does something interesting. Because repitch, actually, as you change the BPM of the sample, it actually changes the pitch of the sample. Because it's actually reading more samples more quickly. So that's why the pitches are getting higher when you're reading more samples more quickly, and the pitches are getting lower when you're reading less samples more quickly. Right? So this all gets into the domain of audio manipulation without a device even. This is just something you can do with an audio clip, right? This is just all audio data, right? So this is something to experiment with, something to get familiar with, yeah. So that's what the warp mode really allows you to do. You can engage these different modes to engage different behaviors. And actually, I need to flesh out a little bit more on all of these different modes. I ran out of space on OneNote to like create subpages, so I have to like put them all here. But you can experiment with these different modes, and we'll look more at them over time. But it's really handy to be able to manipulate stuff like this, to change pitch and do all this. Oh yeah, sure. Anyone have a
what's grain size exactly?
Grain size. Okay, let's take a look. I think texture, grain size. So I believe what this has to do with let's see. This kind of gets a beat repeat effect from what I remember before. I have to investigate a little bit more. Let's see. Let me lower this to hear it a little better. Let me lower the tempo. So it's like grains really. The idea of a grain is chopping a sample into smaller subsamples. So like you chop 100 samples into 10 samples, basically, right? That's what I understand to be grains, and I don't have a totally deep understanding of this except how it behaves. I noticed that when I raise this value, I get these sort of like off timing beat repeaty kind of effects, right? Like these kind of delays, right? If I lower this value, I get something more like it changes the tone of the particular sound. That's what it gets to me. And then I guess flux just introduces randomness. It's a little hard to hear. I'm guessing the timings of the grains kind of are changing over time. Yes, so that's an interesting thing. But again, it wasn't really obvious when I set this to 80, for instance. You could hear some stuff, right? When I set this grain size to 2, you kind of hear an extra tonal element being added. A crunchiness, right? When I raise this all the way up. It gives it a little motion. It feels a little more like all of the little grains have their own little life cycles. And it feels like instead of one sample, you're basically subsampling, and you have all these other samples to play around with. So it's different than, I mean, all of them have different. They access all of these, a lot of similar techniques. They just have different means of implementing it. Like you kind of get a little beat repeaty effect from beats as well by doing it. But with grains, it's more organic sounding. It's more the grains are smaller in size, so the beat repeats will be smaller in length as well. So that's what happens when you access the texture mode. For tones, something similar to texture. Let's take a look. Let's raise it up to 200 just to get. Let's raise it up to 160 just to get a little more. It seems to me very similar to texture. You lower the value of the grain size, you get more of tones. Because the grains are so small that they're all kind of blending into one another. Whereas you raise the grain size, yes, and you get audible repetitions by raising the grain size because they're more separate from one another. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact algorithm for how they implement this, but that's the creative use I could think of for using these knobs.
Yeah,
If you want, yeah, of course, yeah. Curious because granular synthesis, like the algorithms can get quite complex, so I'm not exactly sure, but you get a sense like tones, textures, audible repeats. So that's that. Again, loop, you could leave this on, you could leave this off. It doesn't entirely matter. It depends on your workflow. If you leave this on, it leaves the possibility for, well, you have to set the length of the loop correctly. So the length of the loop we'll say is 2 bars. We'll say it's 4 bars. And now the consequence of this, just like with a MIDI clip, is you can just keep looping it over and over again, right? So, yeah, things got very distorted and interesting very quickly, right? Since we're on the subject of totally mangling up samples, I guess I'll show you another cool audio effect along these lines. So we talked about sample rate and bit depth and all that stuff. There's an interesting audio effect that allows you to basically change the sample rate of a particular of an audio signal, basically, or it gives you that effect ultimately, and that's the redux effect. So if I drag redux on here, you think, how could we possibly mangle this even more? If I leave downsampling to a high value, it starts to sound 8-bit, right? There's a reason that 8-bit music or 8-bit video game systems sound like 8-bit, because there's not as much resolution, and the result is they sound 8-bit. So I think bit reduction. Ooh, sorry guys, that was really loud. All right. Yeah, things can get loud when you reduce the number of bits because things get, when you reduce the number of bits, you reduce the amount of places of loudness. So like a lot of things could average to being, well, without getting too into it, I'll just say that when you reduce the number of bits, there's less possibilities for volume differences. So essentially, a lot of things could become really loud very quickly, or conversely, a lot of things could become soft really quickly. So when you increase the number of bits, you have more possibilities for volume differences. So yeah, if you really want to mangle something, we're not in Space Jam land anymore, guys. I'm sorry. I know it's a nice place to be, but this is a fun thing to do. This is a very Ableton-like thing to do, to experiment with sampling and audio samples. And we haven't even talked about how to use a device to affect samples. This is just purely using an audio clip and then affecting the clip parameters by changing these different modes around. So let's see. Anyone have any questions about any of this stuff? I know it's like, might be a lot of information, but it's fun.
So for the homework, when we're supposed to sample a track or a clip, we basically, you just want us to use whatever software, Soundflower or the other one, and then do you want us to like edit the audio in some way, or do we just sample it?
Oh, okay. So are you talking about for homework 1 or homework 2?
Homework 1.
Homework 1? Oh yeah, for homework 1, you actually don't have to go that deep in terms of the sampling. Like homework 1, it's just it's simpler than that. So for homework 1, you just have to use an audio sample. It could be an audio sample from within Ableton, or it can be an audio sample from elsewhere. It's just
Oh,
I want.
Okay, so like the samples that are in that what is it called? Like that library of sounds area.
Yeah, it can totally be from there. I just want, basically I want to see people getting used to using audio clips like this. And then now that you know how to use an audio clip, now you can take it to the next degree by moving it around. And I guess, there is more stuff to say about, now that we mentioned, there's a lot more stuff to say about warping. So we talked about changing the, lining up these different transients so that they line up to the grid that we're interested in. If you want to remix a song, let's say like I actually have a song here. This song, everyone recognize this song? Oh, warp mode's on. That's why you can't recognize it.
Yo, listen up, here's the story about a little guy that lives in a blue world. And
right? I don't know why I thought of that song, so I brought it into Ableton. I guess I'll delete it from here, and I'll show you what happens when you bring this in. Wow, sorry about that loud burst earlier. My ears are still like. But luckily I think Zoom probably has a limiter or something, hopefully. And Ableton has a limiter, so. It's not like max MSP or pure data if you've done that, where literally you could be frying yourself if you're not careful. So one thing about it is if I drag in a song into Ableton, you might want to do a remix, okay? And I guess the mode you want to use is different depending on the style or whatever you feel at any given moment. I'll delete all this stuff. Doesn't really need to be here. And I'll drag. I will say this: if I go into my desktop, I think that there is nothing there. If I go into my downloads, here it is. Okay. So now I can actually drag this. I'll drag this into arrangement view. And oh, there's something there. Let's get rid of it. Okay. I'll drag this into arrangement view. And actually, it auto warped the whole thing, which means theoretically, this whole song should be in sync with my click track. It didn't. It didn't do a good job at all. It's not in sync at all. Okay, so that is something that often happens when you import a long sample into Ableton. So it's happened so often that there's actually a setting in Ableton that allows you to turn off warping for long samples. It basically says, I think it's like here, record warp launch, it says auto warp long samples. You can just turn that off. Loop warp short samples, it's usually handy. It's not always handy to launch, to warp long samples. It's more tedious, in fact, but you're gonna probably have to warp it by hand to some degree. Maybe not. Because the idea is sometimes you're gonna have to find beat one, okay? You're gonna have to find where it starts. So for this example right here, this song starts with like choo-choo-choo, and Ableton gets really confused by that because it's not part of a BPM. It's just like before the song. So it's like, oh, it's this part. This must be beat one, and this must be beat two. So actually, there's a thing you have to do in Ableton. You have to find where the song actually starts. So right there, listen up. So right here, this warp marker that it did find, we just have to click warp from here, and then it should actually find the right BPM now. Maybe. It might be totally wrong. And actually, I'll just start the playhead right here. Wow, I didn't remember him being so proficient with speeding up like that. All right, so you could change that. Like, of course, we're in Beats mode right now, so this might sound artificial, right? So let's go to Complex Pro. Here's the story about a little guy that lives in a blue world, and all day and all night, and everything he sees is just blue. So like with Beats, you hear like, it doesn't sound as like, it's more glitchy sounding. So I'd probably stick with Complex Pro. Like, listen to Beats right now and listen to Complex Pro. Here's the story about a little guy that lives in a blue world. And now listen to Complex Pro. Here's the story about a little guy. Now really listen up now, guys. Really listen up. Here's the story about a little guy that lives. That's Beats, that's Complex Pro. Here's the story. Beats. Okay, let's change it so that it does that gating effect. So we only play the sample. Remember, in Beats mode, it plays the transients at the correct speed, the original speed, and it plays everything else at the slower speed. And then it either loops the stuff that is left over, or it just stops playing once it gets to the end. Here's the story about. So I think at really slow tempos. Right? It's keeping all the transients. It sounds like he's actually saying it in the correct pitch, right? But everything else is just getting taken away. Now, if I put on this like weird loop mode on. If I turn on Complex Pro, it kind of sounds, I mean, at this slow of a tempo, it sounds artificial. Okay, so let's bring it, but it sounds good. Complex Pro sounds good at tempos that are close to the original tempo. And what it found was it's changing the segment BPM depending on where we are. So right here, the segment BPM is 128. So if I'm at 128, this should sound exactly right. Here's the story about a little guy that... Now, something to keep in mind though is sometimes when it did kind of auto warp this, and because once you actually click the warp button, it's gonna warp it. It's just gonna do it incorrectly unless you set the right start point. What I do find to be the case sometimes is that as the song goes on, it might be further and further away from the click. So let's go later in the song. Let's see if it's still with the click. So it actually did a good job, but sometimes you'll find that you actually have to literally go in and manually create warp markers. I mean, it takes like an hour to do. I mean, if you're making and if you're getting more serious about audio production, an hour is nothing. You just have to basically go through, it's a tedious process, and be like, look at all the transients that Ableton thought and be like, oh, this needs to go here, this needs to go here, this needs to go here, etc. And you can actually do it one at a time, right? You don't have to actually encapsulate because you're actually moving everything, right? It doesn't matter. You can just, I'm making mistakes because it was already correct. So I made it worse just now. But if it were wrong, that's what you would have to do. You would basically have to go through and check the ending versus the beginning just to make sure that it all lines up. So this is like really useful for remixing. So I guess a really important thing that I did right there was I right-clicked and I said warp from here, right on the first beat, okay? And so that is interesting, right? So if you're doing a remix, I think at some point I'm going to have you do a remix. I know King Brit. If you guys have worked with King Brit, or maybe you haven't, because you might not have, but you should work with King Brit because he's awesome. And what he does when he teaches Ableton is he has students warp samples and make a remix essentially. Actually, what he does which I think he has the luxury of doing for a regular course instead of a summer session course, is have people remix another student's track. And that might be fun. That might be feasible, but I'm wondering if it is feasible because it's so jam-packed. But long story short, I'd really recommend, while we're on the subject of King Brit, I love King Brit, he's so cool. I would definitely take his recording sequence if you're really interested in continuing understanding all of this stuff. It'll kind of go more in depth. It takes a couple of passes to understand this stuff. You know, you'll still stumble. Like, for instance, I think when I was first explaining beats, I think I was on the wrong track, and then I finally figured out exactly what was going on. So it's confusing stuff, but just stick with it, and you'll get better at it. Unrelated to any of this stuff, I do want to talk about Midi Clips a little bit because I did omit some important thing that I think I should tell you about. So if I have a Midi clip, let's see. Command-Shift-T, by the way, is to create a new Midi clip. And I'll like create a new bass right here. I'll go to bass or whatever. I'll find an instrument, and there's all kinds of instruments. Bass. Okay, I'll put a bass on here. There we go. Right, there we go. We got a bass. There's some good latency on it right now, unfortunately. But here's something important to know. So let's say I create a clip right here. Here's the story about a little here's the story about a little here's the story about a little So I'm going to create a little loop. Here's the story about a little So it's a little bass loop. And about a little here's the story about a little here's the story about a little here's the story about a little Okay, there's a couple of things. For one, I do want to emphasize how important it is to have this MIDI editor preview on. If you go to playback and export, you'll see that there's a page dedicated to some of these things like the cue volume. I talked to you about like the sound of the metronome. I didn't finish the sentence, but I need to finish this sentence. If you want to hear the sounds of your audio, you have to make sure, if you want to hear the sounds, if you want to preview the sounds from your browser, make sure you turn on the cue volume. And also, if you want to hear the cue, there's not really a name for this actually. See, for this right here, for a clip, you can actually see in Help View that it says MIDI Editor Preview. But right here, it doesn't have a name for it. So I don't know what this is called. This is called something, but there's no name for it. So I guess the Q audition button. You turn on the Q audition button. I mean, I've circled it so you know what it is. Okay. Similarly, if you want to hear the actual sounds of your MIDI track as you're inputting them, make sure you have the MIDI Editor Preview button on. Otherwise, you're going to struggle. So I have this set up basically. Now, there's another important thing that needs to be talked about, and that is velocity. I haven't talked about velocity yet. And so what you might be wondering about loud and soft, right? Like, how do you make something louder? How do you make something softer? And that's what velocity refers to. And really what this term came from is the idea that if you're actually playing any instrument, like let's think about a piano, the only way you make the piano sound louder is if you go into it faster. If you strike a piano key faster, it gets louder. If you strike a piano key slower, it gets softer. So it all has to do with speed. So what you can do is you can actually change the volume of any particular note by like dragging up and down in this particular region right here. So right here, I'm going to make this note really loud, this note soft, this note loud, this note soft, right? And what I basically have as a result, oh, thank you. All right, cool. Yeah, it's Indian holiday today, so my mom came in and got me dotted. All right, so anyway, so what I want to say is that you can adjust the volume of all of these particular notes this way, or you can actually adjust the volume of the notes by holding down Command or Control, I guess, on Windows, and then clicking and dragging and holding up and down to change the velocity of the note that way. That might be a little more intuitive because instead of dragging this little panhandle, you might just say, I want to just lower the volume of these two notes. You just select and drag, and that's simple as that. Now, another thing that you can do is you can actually create a line of velocity data by holding down Command or Control, clicking in the MIDI velocity editor, and then look, I can basically create a line of automation of velocity data that way. But notice it only happens to the notes that are selected. So right now I'm trying to draw a line over these, but nothing's happening because these notes aren't selected. But if I select these notes and I hold down Command and I go blap, look at that, it's a straight line. Yet another straight line.
Here's the story about a little guy.
Right? So you could access things that way if you want. It's really a matter of personal preference, but velocity is an important sort of thing in order to actually have some dynamic in your music. Literally, dynamics refers to loudness and softness in music theory. So familiarize yourself with that. There's also something else I wanted to say. I can't remember. I don't know if today is a good day to talk about grooves because I've told you a lot of stuff today. Let's see. Velocity, grooves. Okay. I do want to say this, which pertains to MIDI. I know some of you guys might be struggling with creating melodies that are sounding reasonable to your ears. And I want to kind of talk to you about some music theory really quickly. So first of all, it's pretty relatively easy to construct a scale. I've talked about how to do it and how to fold the notes so that they fit into particular, so that your MIDI editor only shows the notes of that particular scale. But you might be wondering, well, which notes do I choose? Well, this is just totally not generalizable. No, this is, I guess, no, this is generalizable, but it's not a catch-all for all the kind of scales that you can use. But generally speaking, if you want a sad, intense, ruminating type sounding song, you can choose these notes for your scale. And basically, again, to do that, I would go to Ableton. I would, I guess I'll duplicate this just so I can keep what I kept earlier, delete all of these notes. And I can basically select, let's see, I want to unfold and I want to select D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, okay? Once I select those notes, I fold it and bam. Now I can basically type in notes from this particular scale and they will sound good or reasonable to your ears if you're unfamiliar with the exact direction that you want to go in. Now, the thing that I want to say is the following. You might feel like a scale is still too many possibilities for you when you're working on a piece of music. So I want to present to you this idea of stable notes, okay? So generally, again, this is just generalizable, but it might not be a catch-all. The first, third, and fifth scale degrees are usually the most stable. So what I mean by that is if I take this right here and I select the first, third, and fifth scale degrees, what I mean is I'm taking this, I'm taking this, and I'm taking this. And it turns out that this note is the most stable. So if you have a song, you want a high preponderance of this note, or in fact, an equivalent to this note would be this note, right? This is the same note, just an octave higher, right? Oh gosh. Okay, so this is the same exact note, same most stable note, just an octave higher. So if you're like dancing around, it would be very boring, I guess, if you only use these notes that are stable. So you could land on one of these other notes, but they have a tendency, they have a gravity to want to resolve to their more stable neighbors. And this is, again, totally general. It's not getting into all the specifics, but this is something that you could do to get started. You could create a melody with only these notes, and basically whichever scale you choose, the happy sounding scale or the sad sounding scale, and then you select the notes that are stable, and you kind of lean on these notes more often than the notes that are unstable. This is something to get you started. Now, I will say something. In a case of a remix situation, this is good advice, but it's incomplete advice. The reason I chose these letters right here is because they're easy to alphabetize. There's no like D sharp, or you might not even know that F with a hashtag. You might think that's a hashtag sign. It's actually a sharp. It basically raises the value of the pitch up a half step. And it's not showing flats, but you could represent something as going up a half step, or you can represent this note as going down a half step. So long story short, this is only showing this possibility in one key. It's showing it in the key of D, right? Because D is the most stable note. We're in the key of D. Unfortunately, that doesn't help us for this particular song because we're in another key. We're in a different key. So if you find, like, let's say you're like, ah, great, I have this, like, these notes, and I folded them, and they're like, this is gonna sound great, and everything's gonna work out awesome, right? I'm just gonna play these notes, and everything's gonna sound awesome. You're gonna find yourself in a world of hurt because here's the story about a little here's the story about. It's not really loud enough to hear, but this isn't correct. Here's the story about a little 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 here's the story about a little. Doesn't sound right, right? It sounds wrong. What you want to use is this little MIDI effect called pitch. And what it'll do, remember you have to put MIDI effects before the devices, it'll basically transpose this so that it works in any key.
Listen up, here's the story about a little listen up, here's the story about a little listen up, here's the story about a little
Sorry, this sound might be just inharmonic in general, so bear with me for one moment. I'm gonna put this sound on.
Listen up, here's the story about a little listen up, here's the story about a little listen up, here's the story about a little.
If I remember what I typed in here, I actually typed in this is in G sharp minor. I just know that because I know it. So we actually, it's too bad. Okay, how can I explain this? This is hard to explain. Essentially, it doesn't help that much to have the transpose knob unless you know what key you're in. So I guess it helps to know what key you are. So like, for instance, blue Abu D, Abu Da, key. And it turns out that that song has a key. It should say G sharp minor, G minor. That's not what I'm hearing here at all. Wait a second, what's going on? Sorry. It seems like it's E now. Oh, I'm playing the wrong instrument. That's wrong information. It's definitely feels more like G.
That website's wrong sometimes, I've noticed. I've used that before, and sometimes it's off.
Well, that's too bad.
Yeah, sometimes it's off with like tempo. I'm not sure about it.
Okay, here's how we want to do it. Here's the best way to do it. So just put a bunch of Ds. Put a bunch of this most stable note down. Okay? Put a bunch of the stable note down.
Listen up, here's the story about a little listen up, here's the story about a little listen up, here's the story.
You want to tune the note basically. You want to basically find remember how I said earlier how this note is the most stable note? Like the first note of a scale is the most stable note. So just create a clip with just the first note, D, okay? And then listen to that note against the actual song that you're trying to sync with. And play with the pitch knob until it sounds right. It's if I hum the pitch of the song. That's the strongest note of the song. And once you found this, then you could actually go back, unfold, and then type in D, E, F, G, A, C, B, D.
Is this kind of like a hack to just take a major and minor scale and transpose it to whatever key you want?
It is a hack to do that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
so
just
like, in theory, like we could just type in our own scale. We don't really need to pitch shift.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to pitch shift. So realistically, like what I would actually suggest if you know more music theory is just to type in a G sharp minor scale. But that looks much uglier. That looks like this. In fact, we're in Dorian, so it's actually E sharp, F sharp. So that's like, so this is kind of a catch-all scale, and then you transpose it. But if you actually know the pitches of a scale, I did this wrong, this is C sharp. You could just stick with the actual pitches, but if you don't, you can just stick with a minor sounding scale and then pitch shift it so that you know what key you're in. Hopefully that helps, because if you're remixing something, you're going to find it frustrating to find things that sound good along with it if you don't actually know what key you're in.
Here's the story about a little listen up, here's the story about.
So that's the story, okay? Listen up. Here's the story. if you don't know what key you're working in, the hack is to just use the most stable note of the key, add a pitch device, and then basically tune yourself to the song. It's like you're tuning yourself to the song, and then you're free to just enter notes, and you don't have to worry about getting it right.
So is this one is a minor, right?
This song is minor, exactly. So it sounds
the scale that you wrote is minor, right?
the scale that I wrote is minor, exactly. So
Okay.
it matches the scale, the kind of tonality of the song, which is in minor as well. If I did a major sounding scale, it would sound wrong because it would disagree with the notes that the original song had. So I'll generalize this. I'll create a better OneNote page to kind of show you this step by step. I can even like create a device for you, and you can just drag it onto your session, and like it can be a tuning device or something. But yeah, this is for those who don't know music theory, who just are anxious to remix songs, and this is like something you probably want to do especially if you don't know music theory. You're going to want to remix songs, so it's like really important that you know the theoretical foundation for how to tune yourself to the song. So anyway, guys, that is a lot of stuff. That again, 3 hours is always a lot of stuff. So hopefully your brains aren't falling out of your head. And just enjoy the process, make more stuff, submit stuff. Remember, by 11 o'clock on Thursday, and we're actually going to listen to stuff on Thursday. So we're going to spend like half of class time on Thursday just listening to student work and breaking it down. In fact, we'll do a lot more of that as the semester, or whatever they call this format of class. It's not a semester, is it? What do they call it? A session? As the session.
First session, yeah.
As this quarter/session goes, we're going to do a lot more presentations to really figure out what people want. So anyway, guys, thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is the website that we're going to use up yet, or whatever
It is up. So if you go to if you basically go to the website, the discussion forum will be available to you. The actual submission form will be available to you. So you have to go under assignments to turn all this stuff in. It's going to be homework 1, and then you have to go under discussions to locate the relevant discussion, and then post your WAV file and.
Where is discussions? I was having trouble finding that. I didn't really understand.
Well, when was the last time you looked? Because I just added that probably 11 o'clock or midnight last night. So
I was looking at it this morning.
Oh, really? Okay, let me take a look at it.
And last night.
Okay, let's take a look. Canvas studies.
Oh, is it on Canvas? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, that's what I was wondering is where it was.
Yes.
Okay, so it's on Canvas.
Oh yeah, so I should add that on Canvas. All right, so.
Professor?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes, what's up?
Oh, I actually had a question regarding that. So do we just embed the images, embed the media file, and then where do we insert the project?
The project, insert a link as a Google Drive link inside the actual post itself. So on the assignment post, you embed, and then you include a typed link.
Okay, so how do you include the link? Do we just upload it to Google Drive, and then we can get a link from there or something, or?
Oh yeah, so yeah, you upload your project folder, you collect all and save, and then you upload that entire project folder. Like in this case, I've got different Ableton projects, and if you go to this project, for instance, you'll see a particular project folder, and you'll see all the samples encapsulated, ready for you to go. And this is what you upload to Google Drive, and then once that's uploaded to Google Drive, you provide me the link to that, and so I can download your project file and enjoy. If I want to, I can download your project file and like break it down and look at it and listen to it.
Oh, okay.
Is it just a regular Google Drive folder, like just on our own personal UCSD account, or like?
Yeah. You can do it on your personal. In fact, what some people do is they just have a running Google Drive folder, because I'm going to ask you to do this for all 5 assignments, or all 4, however many there are. So you might just want to like create your own folder structure and just keep reusing that link so that you stay organized yourself. But it's handy. It's like really handy to get good at this, because you're gonna, especially today in today's day and age when we're collaborating remotely more, it's really good to know how to do this so that you can work with your colleagues and they can contribute, and you know, they can work off your set, you can work off their set, and etc.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. So I can stick around for a little while. I know I'm also I have to take off not too long after that. So we'll yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to talk about it, about anything.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I have kind of a music theory related question.
Sure.
So I noticed the major and minor scale, they use the same notes.
Oh.
I mean, so my girlfriend is a music major, and like she's trying to help me with this stuff. I'm kind of a noob. I'm a computer science guy. I'm taking this as a technical elective. So I'm just kind of trying to understand, like, you build your major scale from whole half, whole half, right?
Right.
Or whole half. And you build your minor scale from whole half, whole half, whole, or something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But you could end up with a scale that has the same keys, like a major scale. I think she was saying, was it C major? That's the equivalent of A minor or something like that.
Yes.
There's like
exactly. So check this out. So if you look at this, C major and A natural minor scale, they actually have the same pitches. It's
right,
just
they have the same pitches. So what I'm saying is, like, if you, let's say you flatten those notes, right, you're gonna have the same notes as, like, your major scale and your minor scale are gonna have the same notes. So why does one sound happy and one sound sad when they have?
Okay. So
that's like my main question, really.
Here's why. So in this case, remember how earlier I talked about how the first, third, and like how the first note is the most important note in a scale?
Right.
In this case, the C is the most important note in the scale.
It's the tonic, right?
It's the tonic, exactly. But in the case of this, even though the pitches are it's the same collection of pitches, I'm privileging this note to be the most important, and I'm privileging. Yeah. So the result is that the A, C, and E are the most salient notes of this scale, whereas the C, E, and G are the most salient notes of that scale.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
By the way, who's your girlfriend? I might know her.
Julia Francone. She graduated from USD already.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I don't know her. I wasn't sure if she was UCSD.
Nope.
Yeah. So anyway, that basically that's the principle. So it's find the scale, and then first, third, and fifth are really salient. But yeah, it's interesting how they're related, because technically that goes into a conversation about modes, and how basically this is an inversion of this scale, because you're basically taking the notes.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty much, that's like where I'm at with what she's teaching me, is like I'm at the part where it's like, okay, a C major is like the complement of an A minor or something like that. Yes. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Absolutely, yeah. So you could actually derive multiple modes. So in fact, that mode that if you look up, this shows all the different relations. Like, actually, wait. I think I have a better drawing here. Where did I put it? I have a good mode. Sorry, gotta find it. Now I'm really interested in finding it.
Yeah, take your time.
Oh, here it is. Okay. So right here, notice how, like, these are the notes of a C major scale, and I color coded each one. So actually, if you use this note as the starting note, you get the Dorian mode. If you use this note as the starting note, you get Phrygian mode. If you use this note as the starting note, you actually get natural minor. You get the minor, which is what we were talking about. So it shows that they're derivative of the same scale. It's just different they're like different inversions. Like you're just starting on a different note, essentially.
I see.
So what I chose here actually for the default minor sound, I actually used Dorian. If just for just FYI, it's like I found it to be it's a cool sound. A lot of songs might use Dorian instead of using Aeolian, which is another name for natural minor. Of these scales, I should say, some of them sound, a lot of these scales, a lot of them perceptually sound major and a lot of them perceptually sound minor. So like this one perceptually sounds major, this one perceptually sounds major, this one sounds minor, this one sounds minor, this one sounds minor, and this one is like the minor that we were just talking about, that your girlfriend was telling you about. But this one is the minor that I just like happened to choose because I found that it might be used in pop more than this minor, but it's not. You can't make it hard. Yeah, you can't make hard. Yeah.
Go on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say you can't make a hard and fast rule about this kind of stuff. So it's like.
Okay, got it. Just kind of gotta just put your hours in.
Yeah, it's just, there's huge lists of songs that have Dorian. There's huge lists of songs that have Aeolian. So if you're curious about replicating a particular song, you might look up the most common notes in that song or whatnot. Or you might look up what scale is the song in, or what mode is the song in. And then you might just decide to like use that whole step, half step combination to figure out what. Yeah, sorry.
Also, I was gonna say, like, what kind of music do you make in your own time? Like, what do you like to do?
Oh man, I like all kinds of stuff. So I actually, on my YouTube, I have some songs that I've made. I need to put up more stuff. It's a little bit of everything because I was trained.
You should, yeah, put a link on the OneNote. I'll check it out.
Oh sure.
Like, I produce too. Like, I'm not a music major, but like before I was in school, I was making music, playing shows, DJing and stuff. So I love it.
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's awesome, man. So I'll put that over here. Link to Nakul's creative endeavors, I guess. I guess you could go Instagram.com/theslyprofessor, but I guess YouTube's probably better. I need to put more stuff up, but I guess YouTube.com/I think theslyprofessor. That's like my secret identity from 6th grade, and I just kept
Nice.
It. Yeah. And then let's see. I think like NakulTiruviluamala.com. That's probably the most boring, but it has stuff that isn't on either of those two. But yeah, I like. I really like it all because
Yeah, same here.
So yeah, and send me a link for what you like too. A student of mine actually sent me an email for stuff they want me to listen to, and I haven't listened to it yet. And
Actually, I have a SoundCloud.
Really?
My SoundCloud name is Tight Snake. It's kind of like same deal. Like, it's my cool little music name. Yep.
Tight Snake, cool. Awesome, man. Well, I'll check this out.
Tight Snake. So those Jungle House FMs, that's our radio show. That my friend does. He's in charge of like a radio show that broadcasts to the UK. So that's all like drum and bass stuff.
Oh, okay.
But if you scroll down a little bit, or if you go to tracks, or scroll to the top and click on tracks, and scroll down a little bit, you'll start to see some of my stuff. But it's like further down.
So this is a collaboration with some or this is.
So that one right there, that one called Drums, that's what I'm currently working on. And I actually, like, oddly enough, my friend gave me a free copy of Ableton. And then I was a Logic Pro guy. And then my friend gave me a copy of Ableton. So I just started using Ableton. I was like, I don't know what the hell is going on. And then I saw this class. So like, it's like perfect timing.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's great. So you'll have yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. So you're coming from a Logic Pro background. Got it.
Right.
That's awesome, man. This is cool. So how many people are in this collaboration?
So this collaboration, Jungle House FM, it's a core of like 3 people, me, my friend, and one other, and then we kind of honestly just like try to get anybody we can to play the show. I would say there's probably about like 10 or 15 like pretty committed members.
Okay, nice, man. That's really cool. I see the ohm too, man. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
That's
Like I
well,
used to do like a lot of yoga and stuff, and like I'm all about that kind of stuff too.
That's cool, man. My mom dotted me up because it's I guess it's like Krishna's birthday today.
That's
so,
what's up.
Yeah, man. So but yeah, that's awesome, man. That's I'll definitely check this stuff out. That's really cool. And so great. That's awesome.
That if there's one I would want you to check out, I think it's that drums one there.
Okay.
And then there's another one. Scroll down a little bit. Let me see if I see it. A little bit more. You can probably scroll down a lot more, actually. Keep going. Sorry if I'm eating up your time.
No,
I don't want to.
No, definitely. It's great.
Scroll down a little more. Oh yeah, roll it. That one. Roll it. That one's. I'm pretty proud of that one. So if there's one you want to check out, that would probably be the one.
Okay, I'll check out.
I'll check out your stuff too.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I need to put up more stuff, but this is cool. Roll it and drums. I'll start out with those. And
yeah, those are the two. Like, I don't want to take up too much of your time. So if there's like a 2 I would want to show you, those are the 2.
Definitely, man. No, it's. I'm happy to check it out. So, great. Well, thanks, man. I'm looking forward to that.
All right, sounds good. I'll check your stuff out too.
For sure, dude. For sure. This is great. You have a lot of tracks.
Yeah, I do. This was like what I was doing before I was in school. So like, yeah, it's kind of been something I had to put on the back burner. But yeah.
Wow, dude, this is really inspiring, man. Really inspiring. This is great. Yeah, I gotta make more stuff. Looking at all the stuff you're making, this is great. So I'm excited to listen to it, man. I'll remember those names, drums, and I'll just recognize it when I see it. Roll it. Great. That's right. Cool, man. Well.
All right. That was pretty much all I wanted to say. And thank you.
I should now that, of course, and now I should. This reminds me that it'd probably be cool to have some sort of platform where everyone can share each other's stuff and
like a show and tell or something.
A show and tell, and we could put it on the discussions or wherever, and show and tell, and a way that people after the fact can kind of network and link each other's stuff up and subscribe to each other's stuff. So
that'd be fun.
Yeah, it's great stuff, man. Well, I'm gonna be driving. I have to actually drive to UCSD in just a bit, so I'll listen to it and yeah, looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, listen to it with the sub.
Okay, for sure, man. I got one in my studio, so I'll make sure to do it.
All right, sick. Yeah, have a safe drive, and yeah, I guess try to have fun at UCSD.
Yeah, for sure, man. And check out the meteor shower tonight if you're able to.
I didn't even know about that. I'll check it out.
The best one of the year. It's nice and warm outside, so sick. Yeah.
All right. Well, take care.
Take care, man. Peace.
Have a good one.
You too.